All right, welcome to Stay Home, Stay Focused. I'm Jack Moline. I'm the president of Interfaith Alliance, and my very special guest today is Reverend Naomi Washington-Leapheart, who is the director of Faithbased and Interfaith Affairs for the city of Philadelphia. And before we get to unpacking that title, I want to ask what I ask each of my guests. How are you?
I'm doing as well as can be expected. I've never lived through a pandemic before, so I am adjusting and adapting and rolling with it, like everybody is. I feel very grateful that I have maintained my health. I have asthma, so I have
Wow.
some trepidation about getting a respiratory illness that would absolutely be devastating to my respiratory system. And my family, my spouse and our daughter are doing well too. So I feel really grateful for that.
That's great. Are you home because of your illness, or has City Hall shut down?
City Hall is shut down. So since I want to say it was about the 15th or so of March,
Hmm.
City Hall has been closed. So I feel really grateful that I can do my work from home
Sure.
and in solidarity with all my colleagues at the city who are also working remotely too.
And so, how are you keeping your focus with all of this demand on your attention for washing your hands and social distancing and all of that? What helps you
Yeah.
through?
Um, I think that the urgency of the moment has been what has snapped me into focus. It seems like every task, every email, every presentation, every live webinar is critical and is vital. And that's not to say that the work that we were doing before the pandemic was, I don't mean to dismiss it or
Of course.
disregard it, but there's something about this moment that reminds me that all of what I'm doing has enormous consequences, and so that has snapped me into focus. So
There's really an intensity through all of this that is unexpected. Are you like me, finding yourself feeling even busier than you were when you were going into the office every day?
yes, yes, and I don't even know. I'm looking at my to-do list, and it feels like the same, but
Right.
somehow it's like I get on at 8 a.m. and I have to pull myself away from the computer at 6.
Right.
So it definitely feels like I have more to do.
Right. Plus, your eyes sort of bulge by the end of the day from all the screen time.
Right, right, right.
So your title contains a pretty large mandate.
Hmm.
How do you see your job?
Yeah. So let me just say that this role has been occupied for at least 15 years in within the context of city government here in Philadelphia. And so I'm stepping into a tradition of collaboration and cooperation between city government and faith communities, houses of worship. I see my role in um, kind of multiple ways. One is to maintain good relationships on behalf of the city with houses of worship across the city. And so that means, rejoicing when they rejoice, mourning when they mourn. I mean, it's a solidarity. It's a showing up. It's a presence on behalf of the city for the various things that faith communities do. So making sure those relationships continue to.
Sure. Sort of a meta pastor for the city's faith
Yeah,
community.
I mean, somebody was like, "Oh, you're the pastor for the city," and I was like, so yeah. I also think that uh, there's a way that I am trying to organize faith communities to support this administration's priorities around making Philadelphia a wonderful place to live, work, and play. Right. So we understand that government can do lots of things, and there are some things that government just simply can't do. And we need to partner. We welcome partnerships with faith communities who can stand in the gap and do some of the things, embody trusted voices in a way that government cannot. So it's about enabling faith communities to do what they do in support of what this administration is trying to do. And then I think there is a pastoral element. I mean, I laugh at it and I'm like feeling really overwhelmed by it, but there is a pastoral element, bringing a voice of compassion, trying to urge government to be centered and contemplative, while at the same time judicious and prudent politically. So I've been really gifted with this opportunity to be a voice of spiritual connectedness within the context of city government. Not the imposition of religion, certainly, but to
make that voice heard.
Yeah.
And you know, you're blessed in Philadelphia. There are really two kinds of major cities in the United States when it comes to houses of worship. There are those cities where, as communities get more prosperous, they sort of flee the downtown area and maybe even leave the environs of the city. And there are those like Philadelphia that have historically strong faith communities where everybody remains represented, even in the very core of the city. I mentioned to you, my son lives there. He got married there. And so I've had the opportunity to see what kinds of wonderful things happen on Sunday morning in Philadelphia, in addition to on Saturday for my Jewish community. It's great. What's the difference between the faith-based part of your title and the interfaith part of your title?
Well, I think that the interfaith part really means that I want to be able to manage some sort of container within the context of city government for interfaith engagement. Not just kind of superfluous interfaith, we get together on Martin Luther King Day or something.
Right. Not just a kumbaya
moment. Right. Not just a kumbaya moment, but real interfaith engagement, where there's no compulsion to kind of evangelize and proselytize, but we are inclined to work together in the ways that we can. And so we're going to, in the next, probably the start of the fiscal year, July 1, announce the appointment of commissioners for the new Mayor's Commission on Faith-Based and Interfaith Affairs. And this is a major reinforcement of this idea.
No kidding.
If you get a bunch of people of faith of a variety of traditions, credentialed and not ordained and not around a table, we really have a sense of the city. We really have a sense of what's going on in every neighborhood. So I'm really excited to be able to do that work.
It's great to have a sounding board like that, and for a diverse community to be able to bring the voices of value and faith to city government as they consider policy. Mm-hmm. Does the faith community have a role in the delivery of services to the citizens of Philadelphia?
Absolutely. And I've seen it. I knew it before this, but I've certainly seen it during this pandemic. As you know, in all of the cities around the country, there's been this effort to make sure that people can eat,
right,
that people can access basic services. And faith communities have been extraordinarily vital to this work, particularly of food distribution. The city and the school district partnered to have food distribution sites, and all of the faith communities are still operating their food pantries and their food distribution programs, meal distribution programs. And so that's just one indication, one example that faith communities show up and step in the gap when service provision needs to happen in a broad way, in a large scale way. So we really are grateful. I'm hoping that during my tenure in this role, we'll be able to chronicle and capture and quantify that service that faith communities offer to the city in a report. So
it would be a great reinforcement for the people who are doing it and an even better encouragement to the people who are looking for a way to fulfill the mandate of their faith in service.
Mm-hmm.
I did a little research on you. We've known each other for about 15 minutes here, but your life's work includes a lot of attention to the issues of racism and LGBTQ rights in this
Mm-hmm.
country. What is the relationship that you cultivate with faith communities that might be a little resistant to the message that these are issues that they ought to be addressing?
Mm-hmm. Um, One of the things I like to say is that uh, I bring all of myself to my faith. So in some ways, my faith, uh, my participation in a faith community or my adoption of a faith tradition has to align with my sense of identity in the world.
Hmm.
Um, I, as a Black person, I, as a woman, I, as a queer person, my faith has to accommodate the fullness of my identity. And I think all of us are doing this. All people of faith are negotiating, right, the terms of the relationship between their faith identity and their other identities.
Sure.
And so what I try to do is just point out that you've been doing this. I mean, you may not do it in the ways I'm doing it, but you experience some dissonance when there is a rub or some contention between your core identity, whether it's a Philadelphian, that's part of my core identity, or a middle child. I'm a middle child, and so that I'm wired in a particular way, or I'm a rural person. I grew up around land, and land is vitally important to me, and that's core to my sense of identity. When you experience a disconnect between core identity and faith, you feel it.
Sure.
And so my work has been about helping people to kind of be honest about that, and admit their own uh, identity negotiations. And we don't have to agree about the ways we negotiate, right? So I negotiate my faith as a Christian and my identities in a particular way so that it aligns within me. You don't have to do that in the same way. But let's acknowledge that we're all doing that negotiation. So that's been kind of my entry point to that conversation.
And it sounds to me like you encourage people to have integrity about those negotiations, uh, whatever the result of that deliberation turns out to be.
Yeah,
It's a
for
very
me,
wise approach.
yeah, the conclusion is less significant than the process for me.
Hmm.
Can I be honest during the process? And then I fall out where I fall out at the
Right.
end of the day. And I would dare say that the conclusion is ever evolving, at least for me, that I haven't arrived any place. It's not a destination really. It's just how honest can I be throughout the process? Every day, am I practicing integrity?
So you can't be everywhere in the city to carry that message.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly we have people who are watching and listening from all over the country who may be interested in having the kinds of conversations you're encouraging now. How can a faithful parishioner respectfully and effectively agitate for a justice-based ministry that takes these things into consideration?
Mm-hmm. Hmm. It's hard. It's hard to
Yeah.
organize. One of the things I say all the time is that clergy people are organizers. I mean, they may not put that on their business cards. They may not, have that in the bio. But what you're doing is organizing within a community, trying to build power, and be honest about where the power lies in a community. And I think parishioners are doing the same things, often internally organizing within the context of a faith community. Um, One question a professor asked me in seminary and has stayed with me, is have I identified why this is worth my life's commitment, right? So going through the ritual and routine of religious life or faith life um, is fine. How do we imbue meaning into that? How do we raise the stakes? I think this work, justice work, is about raising the stakes and identifying why the stakes are high for you and for me, not just folks who have been historically marginalized, not just folks who have been historically oppressed, but the stakes are high for all of humanity to reach a place of shalom, to reach a place of flourishing, human flourishing. And so I would say to any parishioner who wants to move their congregation to a place of engagement in justice work, keep asking the question, keep raising the stakes. We believe this, but why? What difference does it make in the world? And what harm might this belief actually manifest in the world? Like, can we really look at how might our believing this manifest as harmful action in the world? And the courage to ask that question is the first step to doing any kind of justice work.
There you go. It is both a gorgeous and terrifying question.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think for a person of faith with integrity, as you've said, it's a question that has to be asked constantly, because otherwise you just fall into habit, and habit is what always gets us into trouble, because we just assume the way things are, the way things that they have to be, and
Yeah.
will continue to be.
Yeah.
Toward the end of the conversation, I like to ask my guests to recommend a practice or a thought process that will help the people who are viewing and listening become inspired and remain engaged during this quarantine. Do you have something that you would recommend to people?
Mm. Well, I'm sitting here looking at this, so I'm going to show you this.
Good.
This is a ZZ plant, affectionately known as the ZZ plant. It has a really long name, but both words start with a Z, and so we just nickname it the ZZ plant. It doesn't need much direct sunlight. I am not a gardener. I have no kind of green thumb whatsoever. So, but I wanted to cultivate whatever skills or whatever dispositions I need that are manifested in the idea of taking care of plants. So I ordered these plants, and I have one upstairs and one down here in the basement. And my curiosity has been stoked. This part of the plant is new. It wasn't there when I bought the plant, and so just watching it grow, making sure that I pay attention, but that I don't smother the plant. You know, I started out overwatering the plant, making sure that the plant has the ideal environment to thrive and grow. And this is teaching me something about living in the middle of a quarantine, living in the midst of confines. What can I do to ensure that I have the best environment to grow, even under these constraints, right? This plant lives in my basement. You know, there's no natural light source, the small natural light source over there. And so this is teaching me something about what it means to be alive and what it means to grow. And so I have picked up this as a practice. So, you know, you may not have a green thumb. I don't have a green thumb either. But can you find a way to watch something grow? Whether it's in your backyard, garden, vegetables, whether it's a ZZ plant that doesn't require a whole lot of maintenance. That's been really, really, really
It's
impactful
wonderful.
for me.
It's wonderful.
So,
In our house, it's the stubs of the scallions that we bought
mm,
8 weeks ago, and every morning when I come down, they seem to have grown all the way back to where we cut them down from. And
uh-huh.
it's nice to have a reminder of the miracle of life rather than the danger of it in the midst of
Sure.
all of this.
Absolutely.
Naomi, thank you so much for being with me today and for having this conversation. I feel like I've made a new friend through all of this, and
Absolutely.
look forward to visiting my kid in Philadelphia so that I can drop in on you when all this
Sure,
is over.
sure. Yeah, we welcome you. Thank you, Rabbi Moline, and thank you to the Interfaith Alliance for inviting me to do this. It was a treat.
Thanks. And to all of you who are viewing and listening, stay home and stay focused.